organic fertilizer, fertile soil, moisture retention, stronger root system, better pest management. These are just some of the reasons why people consider worm farming. But for many, one of the challenges that they face, they have the desire to start a worm farm, but then based on where they're living, they may not have the space to start a worm bin. So that is what we're going to be addressing in this video. What can you do if you have little or no space to start a worm bin, but you'd like to have one? What we are looking at here is a shoebox, which is 6 inches across and about 13 inches long. And the height of it is 5 inches. Did you know you can have a worm farm with just this little box? And depending on your circumstances, you may be able to have several of these too. But where would you put it? You have several options when it comes to where to put your worm bin. So if you don't have the space to accommodate large bins, you can start with just one of these. And some of the areas where you could keep them: underneath a kitchen sink. Maybe there's a little spot in your closet that you're not using. What about underneath your bed? Underneath your bed might be a very good location because it is out of the way. This thing is small enough that it can fit underneath the bed. You can have several of them underneath your bed. Therefore, you need not worry about space. Maybe you have a desk that you can put it under, but there are various spaces. And for bins like these, there are some that are transparent, and then there are those that are not. So if you are concerned about someone seeing your bin and it looks like this, where you can see the content of the bin, then you get the ones that are not transparent. Now the next question that a lot of people ask is, can I use worms from my garden? That answer depends on the type of worms that you have in your garden. Not all worms that are in the garden are considered composting worms. Do all worms in the garden compost? Yes, but can they be raised in a composting bin? Not all of them. What's the difference? There are some worms that live in the soil. They eat organic matter, but then if you put them in a bin, they will not do well. They are burrowing worms, so they're always trying to go deep into the soil, which means that if you put them in a bin, they will most likely harm themselves trying to go deeper. Now, how can you identify composting worms different from regular earthworms? Composting worms like to live in the top organic matter that is on the surface of the soil. So, for example, if you have leaf matter or you put food scraps on the surface of your garden, you will find worms living inside that organic matter. Those are composting worms. There are also composting worms that live deep down in the soil, but then they come up to the surface to get organic matter and take it back down into the soil with them. These type of composting worms are known as night crawlers. So these are the ways that you can identify your composting worms. And if you are seriously considering starting a worm bin, but you do not have enough space, then you can always start with a shoebox. This bin that you're looking at here, all the worms that are in here, and you will notice that my worms are very tiny. They're all babies with a few adults in here. I put about 6 adults in here a few months ago, and this bin is loaded with babies. So there are the adults. I'm not sure what type of composting worms these are. They look like red wigglers, but they're larger than a red wiggler, and their coloration is a bit strange. Their coloration look more like a European nightcrawler, but somewhat darker. There's one particular one in here, and every time I see it, it's almost look like a millipede. You know, those stripy looking millipedes? That's how he looks. But yes, that is how you can start a worm bin in a simple shoebox and have compost to use. So what you would do when you start in something like this, you might be wondering, can that little bin provide enough castings if I don't have enough space to have more than one bin? Can it provide enough castings for me to be able to look after my garden? The answer is yes, depending on how you use your castings. So for a bin like this, it will take you, depending on the amount of worms that you have in there, it can take you 6 weeks for them to process the material that you have in here. Then you're going to harvest the castings and restart your bin. What can you do with the castings that you have harvested? Well, the good news is, for worm castings, if you don't have enough castings to spread over in your garden, the other option is worm tea. So what you would do is get a cup of worm castings to 5 gallons of water, 1 tablespoon fish hydrolysate, and 1 tablespoon of molasses. You will allow this to sit for 24 hours, or you may choose to aerate it for 24 hours, after which you have 3 days to use that worm tea. You can either use it to water your plants, or you can use it as a foliar spray, and that works both ways. Now, as often as possible, you can make your worm tea to water your plants. Now, the next thing that you keep in mind is, for the 5-gallon bucket of worm tea that you make, this is considered concentrated, which means that 5 gallons you can dilute it 4 parts to 1. So 1 part worm tea, 4 parts water, and that can cover, if you're using it as a foliar spray, that can cover 1 acre of property. If, however, you're using it to water your plants, then you will have to moderate how much of it you use to ensure that all of your plants are covered. But then and again, when you harvest the castings, this container full, that's many cups of castings, which means you can have a lot of worm tea from just this simple material. Now, when you aerate your worm tea as opposed to steeping it, the microbe population will grow exponentially over that 24-hour period. One of the biggest benefits of worm castings is the microbes that it contains. Therefore, you want to ensure that you aerate the tea as much as you can. If you don't have an aerator, you can always stir the content and allow air to pass through it from time to time during the process of the steeping. So this is how you can have a simple worm bin, small, in an apartment or a tiny home, and still have enough to take care of your garden. So if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more informative videos like these, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel, If you have any questions, you can leave them in the section below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day. Yeah man, a time for grow.